Ariel Helwani recently shared his thoughts on the expanding petition, yes, the one that has already amassed over 115,000 signatures, calling for Jon Jones to lose his UFC belt. Ariel made a valid argument, given that Jones recently stated that he had already informed the UFC of his plans. Why is the UFC still postponing the undisputed title fight if Jon made it apparent that he would not be facing Tom Aspinall? Jones is no longer responsible for the delay if he doesn't return anytime soon. At this point, the UFC may be the one prolonging things. Here's the crazy part. Jon Jones is on the verge of becoming the heavyweight champion with the longest reign in history. He's only 2 months away from breaking the record, but let's face it, not because he's consistently defending the title or dominating the top contenders, but rather due to his lack of activity. After winning the title, suffering an injury, then defending it against Stipe, months have passed with no announcements or significant progress. For the fans, he might soon exceed Cain Velasquez and have the longest heavyweight rule of all time. It's annoying that Tom Aspinall is sitting there wearing a belt while the division has to progress. No one is allowing him to unite. Someone has to act at some point, either by letting Tom take over or by fighting Jon.
Jon does also bring up a good point. If Jon told the UFC like 2 months ago, hey, I'm not interested, it's no longer on him.
Agreed.
You know what I mean? So, like, you remember one time I sat here and I said the UFC is not to blame? And I said that because they met the number. But now, if he tells them, hey, I'm not interested, all right, you could say, well, you're to blame because maybe you told them, hey, if you meet this number, I'm fighting. And then you could say, all right, UFC is now back to blame because he told them 2 months ago, you know, I'm out. Why didn't you give Tom Aspinall a fight? There's this whole thing now. The whole thing is messy. There is no black and white sort of breakdown of it all. But the point is, I think the world has spoken. Look at that.
Tim Welch, Sean Ali's coach, says he believes Shugara will defeat Merab Dvalishvili in the 3rd round. UFC 306 did not accurately represent Sean's abilities. To his credit, Tim didn't minimize Merab. He openly acknowledged that the Georgian is currently the finest bantamweight. He also blamed the old gloves, claiming that they caused problems and that Sean was injured going into that bout. Since the loss, Sean has also been more forthcoming. He acknowledged that he had knocked him out. He is now more aware. He claims to be feeling different and has a totally different strategy going into the rematch. But this is where things start to get strange. Merab essentially outlined the steps Sean may take to defeat him in a recent interview with Michael Bisping. He continued, if Sean wants a chance, he can't stay on the outside like he did last time. He needs to close the distance, fight more aggressively, and make it dirty. He also acknowledged how painful Sean's body kicks were. Since they were seriously hurting people, he advised Sean to keep tearing those to pieces. What do you think will happen in this rematch? Comment below.
Man, I envision a hard fight where Suge's coming out of there dirty, but I envision him finding one of his shots. We got the old gloves backs, and those things are like fucking rocks, those gloves. And I envision him cracking Merab on the lips, hurting him, cracking him again, and then TKOing him.
Wow. Late, middle, early?
Maybe third round.
All right. And then we do it again for a 3rd time.
Yep. Like, Sugar's in great shape. He's ready to fight for 25 minutes. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen on that night.
Do you still feel the same about Merab?
In what way?
Well, you said like he's reckless, he leaves his chin, he can get knocked out, things like that, or do you view him in a different way?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely view him in a different way. He from the outside looking in, similar to Sean, if you watch video on him, it's like, God, he's got so many holes. But then when he's in front of you, it's different. His timing on his shots is so good, and he's so explosive, and he penetrates so hard, and he'll run through you. Definitely not underestimating it.
Olympic wrestler Vugger Uruhov, who trains with UFC champion Jon Jones, recently revealed some startling details about Jones's actions throughout the previous few months. In sharp contrast to his typically rigorous work ethic, Jones has started taking more pauses during their training sessions, according to Uruhov. Jones would take extended breaks from practice before returning to resume. Soon after, he said that Jones frequently smoked marijuana before dozing off on the couch during workouts, which was totally uncharacteristic for the usually attentive athlete. Uruhov, who had witnessed Jones's extremes at the gym on several occasions, was disturbed by this shift. He pointed out that aside from his earlier years, Jones had always been renowned for his self-control and resolve, but lately, his concentration began to wane. Uruhov respects Jones's privacy and understands that everyone faces personal struggles, but this obvious difference made him worry whether something was bothering the champion. He acknowledged that it might only be a transitory phase and voiced sincere concern about how these behavioral changes could impact Jones's performance and focus going forward. But he couldn't ignore the break from his typical disciplined routine. These behavioral changes could raise questions about Jones's training and mental focus as he may be preparing for a high-stakes fight against Tom Aspinall. Because of his reputation for quickness and agility, Aspinall is a dangerous opponent in the octagon. With such a strong opponent, Jones could lose if he loses focus or discipline. Orushev expressed sincere concern about how these changes would affect Jones's performance and focus going forward, especially with such a significant fight approaching, even if he acknowledged that it might only be a short phase. Rob Whittaker isn't holding anything. He shares the opinions of the majority of MMA fans regarding the reported rematch between Yair Rodriguez and Alexander Volkanovski. There is absolutely no interest in this rematch. Sure, you could argue that he was still in his prime when Vogue destroyed him, and that since then Volk has suffered 2 brutal defeats and perhaps Yair's chances have slightly improved. But even with that argument, there isn't any demand because the first fight was so one-sided that fans felt they had seen everything they needed to, and even El Pantara's commanding performance over Patricia Pitbull didn't significantly change public opinion. Since both fighters have lived in Mexico for the most of their life, their heated altercation at the UFC 314 news conference between him and Diego Lopez is the one that has everyone talking. Because UFC No Say is being held in Mexico, it only seems sense that this fight would take place there. This possible battle would turn out to be a blockbuster. What fans really want is the fight, the plots, the emotion, the stakes.
Mate, no one wants to see this fight. No one.
Yes.
no one was sitting at home thinking, I didn't know, you know what fight I want to run back? Volk and Yair. Okay? Not yet anyway, because Volk did some good, honest work in that first fight, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought Yair had a lot to work on from that fight. I think a lot of it was mental, but that's how I walked away from that fight. I thought that fight was very one-sided, and I thought he had things to work on. And by no means is this to be offensive, okay? Because I know someone's got to just clip this and send it to him, and then I'm going to have another enemy. But it's just, this is how I've just seen things, okay? Through my lenses, which could be wrong or skewed or half-blind. It doesn't matter. Now, there was a storyline that whole fight week with him and Diego, okay? I wanted that fight to happen.